Story 1. When the time of feeling tipsy becomes shorter and the time of being intoxicated becomes longer. Story 2. There are many definitions of alcoholism, but I will use one that matters. You are an alcoholic when drinking begins to negatively affect your life or the lives of those around you in meaningful ways. There are also functional alcoholics who are technically addicted in a psychological sense, but their drinking does not significantly affect their lives. Many people fit this description and frustrate members of Alcoholics Anonymous. If your grandfather comes home and has 2 scotch and sodas every day after work, but goes to work on time daily, cares for his family, does not become belligerent or violent, and pays all his bills on time, that is often considered alcoholism, but no one is concerned because it is not harming anyone in any significant way. Story 3. For me, it was when I started drinking alone much more than I used to. I noticed that I would drink when I was angry or sad about something. At that point, it stopped being about having fun and became about using alcohol to numb my emotions. Also, obviously, drinking until you black out every time is a clear indicator. Story 4. I used to work in addiction treatment. The general definition is continued use despite negative consequences, such as problems at work, legal issues, negative health effects other than hangovers, financial difficulties, and negative impacts on family relationships. Story 5. Alcoholics usually do not go to parties. They drink by themselves almost every day. I used to drink and smoke. The combination of having a few shots and a smoke to wind down was amazing, but it takes a toll on your health. I stopped both after a heart attack. I did get a helicopter ride out of it though. Story 6. I say when you cannot get through the workday or school without thinking about the drink you are going to have afterward. If you cannot put it down for a few days at a time, you have a problem. We partied pretty hard in my early 20s, but it was rarely about the desire for alcohol itself. It was always about the social aspect first, having fun, and the potential to meet someone. Once it is calling you like maintenance, it is time to put it down for a while. If you are fighting that feeling like I sometimes do, having an ice-cold soda instead seems to help. It is very satisfying. Story 7. Cool party drinker brother guy is not great in the first place because his identity is already centered around drinking. It might seem kind of funny in college, but when you get older and need to actually rely on this person to be your friend or partner, it is not a fun time. Story 8. When you can't stop or slow down even if you want to. Typically somewhere around 25. The biggest party guy I knew, Martin, was wild for years. He was a computer guy before being a computer guy was common. Despite being self-taught with little formal education, he was making all kinds of money right out of high school. He was the life of the party, rarely sober and never on weekends. He was living it up Gatsby style with no end in sight. I'll never forget the day he gave it up. On a Saturday afternoon, I called him to make plans for the evening. Seemingly out of nowhere, he said, "No thanks. I don't want to live like that anymore. The contract I'm working on is starting to turn into a career. Things with Stephanie are getting serious. I'm beginning to feel strong about her and see her as somebody I could have a future with. You can't have a career and a good relationship with someone drinking your way through life." I didn't take him seriously. I'd heard the same type of stuff from many other people and it never lasted. 2 or 3 weeks and they went right back to the same behavior. But with Martin, it lasted. That conversation was 20 years ago. He is a mid-level cybersecurity manager at a Fortune 500 conglomerate. He and Stephanie just celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. They have 3 kids. The oldest is a sophomore in high school. The difference between Martin and an alcoholic is that Martin decided to change his life and he did. Alcoholics make that decision but never actually make any changes. Weeks, months, and years go by, and they never do anything different. I understand there are high-functioning and successful alcoholics. The point is, at some point they decide they don't want to drink but can't stop. Martin did what they can't. Made a decision to stop and did just that. Story 9. Being fun at the party and drinking alone at home every day is the difference between the two. Socially, I am great, fun to be around, and polite. I like to clean the house after the party before leaving. Then I would get home and drink until I fell asleep. I am 5 days sober and figuring it out as I go. Story 10. When everything becomes an activity done while intoxicated. Drinking and bowling, drinking and karaoke, drinking at amusement parks, drinking at the beach, drinking while staying home and watching television. At some point, it becomes too much. Story 11. When it becomes a habit, you do not second-guess or control it. When it is on your mind even when not involved. When you try to cut back but cannot, even in the face of adverse consequences. Story 12. Drinking on weeknights or not being able to hang out without alcohol. Like, dude, we're just going to the park to relax. Do you really need to bring a 12-pack? Story 13. I had a few markers. Day drinking at work. Calling out because you are exhausted. When you prioritize drinking. Story 14. When they start doing it almost daily, when they start planning to do it, and when everything revolves around them having some drinks. Story 15. As a person who used to be a social drinker but became an alcoholic some years ago, I found that I could not sleep unless I had been drinking that day. After going on a binge and then drying out, I would stay awake for 2 or 3 days at a time. That was a sign that few people talk about. Story 16. Dude, it's 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. Why do you have a bottle of Jägermeister in your hand? No, we are not getting shots. This is my nephew's christening. Where are you? The bar? You are supposed to be at work. It is 9 a.m. Story 17. It is the day you turn down a midnight plan because you have an early morning, then realize nobody even laughed. They just nodded in agreement. Story 18. I have witnessed the complete and devastating impact of knowing someone who struggles with alcoholism. It is a deeply destructive experience, often affecting those around the individual even more profoundly than the individual themselves. The consequences of long-term alcohol misuse in this family have been severe. They have lost their home, experienced the breakdown of a marriage, and acts of infidelity. There have been various forms of abuse and neglect toward both animals and children, culminating in the children being removed from the home. Grandchildren have also suffered neglect, and the individual in question has experienced repeated self-inflicted injuries from falling, numerous arrests, antisocial behavior orders, and violence from partners. Over time, this has spiraled into overtly aggressive and racist behavior. What makes the situation even more disturbing is the destructive impact of their actions and the individual's outward appearance of being content, while there lies a toxic and deeply harmful persona that continues to affect everyone around them. This person once donated a kidney to save her son, who is also an alcoholic, likely shaped by a familial environment surrounded by substance misuse. Despite her selfless act, the son's health declined again as his kidneys began to fail, yet he continued to drink heavily. There is no accountability, and both mother and son still drink, often together, reinforcing each other's destructive behavior. Story 19. Speaking from personal experience, it was when I started to get withdrawal symptoms in the middle of the day. They did not go away until I opened the bottle after work. Story 20. Up dancing. Still the party brother. The mood changes the moment you fall through a glass coffee table. Then you become an officially drunken loser. Story 21. Many things could indicate this. It could be that you cannot control the amount you drink once you start, that you hide it from others, that you use it as a coping skill, or that if you do not have alcohol, you start to feel sick. Story 22. It boils down to this. A party animal likes to drink. An alcoholic needs to drink. A party animal can go a day without drinking. They can attend dry events without complaining about the lack of alcohol. They may occasionally overdo it and end up going to work with a slight hangover, but they can acknowledge their mistake and try to learn from it. An alcoholic needs to drink every day to feel normal. They feel entitled to alcohol at every function and cannot have fun without it. They have called out of work so many times for being drunk or hungover that they have used all their paid time off and possibly have been fired in the past. They miss dance recitals and soccer games because they were too intoxicated to remember or drive. They cannot stop once they have started. They frequently black out, throw up, or drive under the influence. They routinely ruin parties because they are out of control. A party animal says things like, "I'd better stop after this one and switch to water so I can drive later," or "I need to take it easy tonight. I have work in the morning," or I can't drink. I'm on medication. An alcoholic does not. Story 23. Do you know the difference between a drunk and an alcoholic? Drunks do not have to go to those meetings. Story 24. I often challenge people to go a month without alcohol, ideally every year, as a self-test to see where and how it is affecting their life. One friend goes every February without alcohol quite easily, no cravings, and he uses the time to recalibrate and assess the occasions he would normally drink to determine if they were necessary. A number of other people I know took up the challenge but failed to complete the month. Then the excuses started. It was dumb anyway. I just wanted a beer today. Okay? A week was long enough to prove the point. In all these cases, I tried to emphasize that if they cannot go 1 month sober, they do not have as healthy a relationship with alcohol as they seem to think. This is not meant to be a magic fix. It is simply a way to check on yourself and do some evaluation. Story 25. I know this is different for everyone, but drinking alone or as a medical substitute is concerning. I have a beer here and there after cutting grass or on hot days. However, getting drunk alone is definitely a sign of a problem, along with drinking to help with pain or sleep. Alcohol has always been a way to enhance a good time with friends. Story 26. When your behavior begins affecting uninvolved people, there is a problem. If you want to get intoxicated and party with your friends, that is acceptable. However, if your party spills out into the neighbor's pool, you have an issue. Story 27. If you want to see a decent dramatic representation of this, the book and film The Spectacular now handle it well. Story 28. Once you hit your late 20s and you are still trying to have cool party drinker, be your whole personality. Story 29. For me, it was when I called up my friends to drink and they all declined. That in itself was not the issue. They were all legitimately busy that night. The problem was I said forget it and got very drunk by myself anyway. This became my new norm. Story 30. For me, it was when everyone else started to get serious about homes and babies, and I was more interested in showing up to any gathering with a bottle of scotch. Story 31. I am not sure. I only buy a bottle or two of port or whiskey around Christmas time. I can say that I have known some high-functioning alcoholics. I work with one now. She is very effective at work, but she goes home and drinks 6 every night. I do not know how she does it. She admits she is an alcoholic, but she says it is her life. Story 32. When that person keeps trying to convince you and others to turn random non-party days or nights into parties so that they can binge drink appropriately, absent that, binge drinking when there is no party is a pretty obvious sign. Story 33. In their 30s, alcohol starts to take a visible toll, and all their friends are having children, at least in the United Kingdom. Story 34. Drinking the next morning. When I was a young man, I worked graveyard shifts with some tough coworkers. One man took a liking to me and advised me never to drink the next morning. He said that is what would get me in trouble. He told me my friends might offer me a beer as a hangover cure, and to just say no thanks and drink water. The man who always offered me morning beers unfortunately died from a drunk driver on the way to work one morning. The irony. Story 35. Drinking alone is usually one of the clear signs. Drinking every night at home. Going to the bar by yourself. Anecdotally, it is also the man who, after his friends grew older, found newer, younger friends to continue drinking with. Story 36. Day drinking. Former alcoholic here. If you can wait until the end of the day to drink, you are not off the deep end yet. If you are drinking at 7 a.m., that is when you know it is a problem. Story 37. The look on their face. I was at a high school party, and a 16-year-old had the same look as my alcoholic 40-year-old father. Story 38. When alcohol tolerance is so high that by the time a person is feeling great, they are almost blackout wasted, which leads to doing foolish drunk behavior. Ask me how I know. Story 39. If someone carries a flask daily and is not on the way to a party or baseball game, that is a clear sign for me. Story 40. You drink even when you know you should not. I know many functioning alcoholics, and I think too many people in this thread jump to the worst cases without considering that alcoholics with good jobs and families are much more common than those who fall down drunk starting at 11 a.m. Story 41. When they cannot plan ahead, know their limits, and be responsible. A party animal drinks until they feel dizzy and then takes a break to eat pizza until they feel better. An alcoholic drinks until he can barely stand and calls that fun. A party animal drinks when they are in a good mood to support their good time. An alcoholic drinks until they are cursing everyone they love. A party animal has a group with a designated driver or enough money for a ride service. An alcoholic tells everyone he is fine and then disappears. Everyone knows where a party animal is because they want their friends with them when they drink. You have to find an alcoholic. Story 42. When you ask what their hobbies are or what they do for fun, the answer is just drinking or partying. Story 43. When you need alcohol to have fun or to get through the day, no matter the justification, as soon as it becomes a compulsion, you are an alcoholic. Story 44. They do not. It is other people who transition to more mature adults and realize the cool party brother drinker guy is an alcoholic. Story 45. When the negative consequences appear and the drinking does not stop, a partygoer might get too drunk, have a terrible hangover, embarrass himself and say, "I am never doing that again." The transition to alcoholism occurs when they get a driving under the influence charge, ruin a relationship, or miss work because of drinking, and then repeat the same behavior the next weekend. When the hangovers are just the cost of doing business, the line has been crossed. Story 46. When you start asking yourself the question, "Do I drink too much?" and it makes you feel uncomfortable. Story 47. If you only drink to make fun things more enjoyable, you are probably okay. When you start drinking to make miserable things less miserable and boring things less boring, you are starting to develop a problem. Story 48. You want to stop drinking, but for some reason it does not happen, and you no longer seem to have a choice in the matter. Story 49. My standard for alcoholism is much lower than most. If you consistently ruin other people's time at the party because you're drunk, then you don't get to drink anymore. Point blank period. Everyone has an isolated incident and blacks out by accident every once in a while. But after that, the grace doesn't extend very far from my end. If alcohol makes you unpleasant, then maybe you shouldn't drink anymore. Story 50. They are always willing to drink and will change their plans if the opportunity to drink arises. Do not get me wrong, I can drink an entire bottle of Jack Daniels or two when I party, but I also go literal months without drinking. Story 51. When all your best days, as you tell them, are behind you, there are no new experiences. You are just stuck in place, reliving the same tales and conversations night after night, with little to no new stories or experiences being added. I have some friends in that place, hitting 40 and just stuck with the rest of their lives slowly dissolving. It is so sad to watch, especially when you know other family members and see the toll that the disease of alcohol takes on everyone close to that person. Story 52. In my case, when I looked around and realized nobody else was in party mode at 11 a.m. on a random Tuesday. Story 53. Well, as that person, I would say the change happened when I graduated from university with my master's degree, and now I am an unemployed alcoholic. Story 54. With my ex, it was when he had to start drinking at lunch because he could not make it through a full day of work without drinking. He already had a few drinks in the morning and as soon as he got home, but when he added lunch alcohol to the day, he really never stood a chance. He was a full-on alcoholic after that. Story 55. I once stopped in my neighborhood liquor store early in the morning to buy lottery tickets, and there was a long line because the Powerball had a huge jackpot, like a few $1 billion. A man walked through the doors, slipped the clerk a $20 bill, and the clerk handed him a brown bag with a bottle inside, all packaged and ready. It was obviously a daily occurrence, and he did not want to wait in line. Story 56. If someone's drunkenness causes an incident they do not want to repeat, a party animal will reassess and avoid going beyond that point of no return next time. An alcoholic will return to that point again. Story 57. When he calls you at 2 a.m. his time and laughs at you, making fun of you for an hour while bragging about how much sex he is getting, as if we are both 16 with fake IDs sitting in a bar like we did 30 years ago. But it is okay. Once they go to Alcoholics Anonymous, you get to hear all about that all the time. Story 58. Kind of in stages. 1. Never seems to be able to have fun without having a few drinks. Regularly hungover in situations where better planning was needed. Drinking when it is inappropriate, such as at work where it puts the job at risk, or arranging life to allow more drinking, such as seeking jobs where drinking is permitted. Being drunk when it is inappropriate. Ruining relationships and being unable to care for oneself at times due to intoxication. Recognizing any of the above and wanting to stop but being unable to. Story 59. My friends and I were probably all way beyond cool party drinker. But it didn't hit me until my buddy started getting angry drunk. Once the fun stopped, I sobered up and moved on. Story 60. When you have only started drinking because you get the shakes if you do not, 4 years, for months, and 8 days clean and sober. Story 61. As a middle-aged man, I have come to realize that the cool party drinker guys were almost all alcoholics with varying abilities to function. Some are actually quite successful financially, but I do not know how much it has impacted their families. I do not judge my friends. To each their own. I have pretty much given up all drinking because I get nothing from it, and it makes my life more difficult the following day. Story 62. The cool party drinker is an alcoholic. He is just an alcoholic you enjoy spending time with. Story 63. When she mixes alcohol with her morning tea, my older sister started doing that in her early 20s, and it has been downhill from there. Story 64. The moment someone starts to lose control when they are stumbling, aggressive, inappropriate, or excessively intoxicated. A responsible partygoer is someone who can have a few drinks, be relaxed, enjoy themselves, and either use a rideshare service, catch a ride, stay the night, or sober up before driving. That person remains aware of responsibilities and does not endanger others. An alcoholic is someone who needs to be watched, supervised, and protected from harming themselves or others. They may try to drive, fight, or perform dangerous stunts. If someone does that to me once, I am done. I will not take care of an adult who cannot monitor their own consumption. Story 65. When they feel the need to lie about it or hide it because deep down, even they know it has gotten out of control. Story 66. My personal line was drinking alone. If I drank alone, I was an alcoholic, but if I drank with friends, it was social. I had many drinking companions whom I cut ties with when I quit drinking, and very few true friends. Story 67. For a party animal, drinking interferes with their work. For an individual with alcohol use disorder, work interferes with their drinking. Story 68. Normal drinkers do not drink every day. Normal drinkers do not drink too much. Normal drinkers do not drink at work. Normal drinkers do not lie about how much they drink. Normal drinkers do not lie about if they drank. Normal drinkers do not black out. Normal drinkers do not need to prove they do not drink too much. Normal drinkers do not have people telling them they might have a problem. Story 69. As a recovering alcoholic, I knew I was developing a problem when I started blacking out more than half the time I drank. Additionally, my personality began to change completely when I was intoxicated. Story 70. I haven't been drunk in 15 years and never had more than 2 beers in a day. I didn't really care for wine or spirits, but a beer to unwind at the end of the day turned into 2 every day. My wife asked me to take a break for 3 months. For 3 weeks, once it hit around 9 p.m., I thought of nothing else except having a beer. I would go for a walk, which was actually going to the park to drink 2 beers. I would hide beer in the house. Took me 2 months before I managed to go a week without a beer. You can be an alcoholic without being out of control, drinking excessively, or being drunk. Story 71. Either drinking too much on one occasion, not knowing when to stop, or drinking too often, as if they need to drink every day. Either one means it is a problem. Story 72. I can give my 2 cents. I started drinking when I was about 16 years old. Every other weekend, I went out and had drinks at different friends' parties. When I turned 18, we went to different bars since the legal drinking age is 18. Addiction and alcohol abuse are not uncommon in my family. In my early 20s, I continued going out until one day I found myself alone in the living room drinking halfway through a bottle of brandy. I decided to go straight edge for a year, no drinking and no social smoking. I did not want to be like my family. That was about 11 or 12 years ago. Now, I drink only on special occasions like someone's birthday or New Year's, and only 1 or 2 glasses. I feel pretty good about that. Story 73. Interesting question. Our friends drink daily, every single day, yet both insist they are not alcoholics because they want to drink. They do not have to. They also added that they go to work every day with no problem. We stopped seeing them socially because they are always drinking or drunk. It is not fun to be around, as they want everyone to join them or they heckle. Not fun. I would say they transitioned back in their 20s. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.